Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Rio Bravo, 1959, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. The story opens without a single word. A saloon. Dust drifting through the air like time itself. A man walks in, scruffy, tired, broken. The piano stops playing. People go quiet. He doesn't speak, doesn't even raise his head. He just walks to the bar and gestures for a drink with a trembling hand. The bartender hesitates, then obliges. But before the glass touches his lips, a coin clinks beside him. Another man, confident, sharp-eyed, slides the drink away and kicks it over. No one moves. A fight breaks out, not with punches, but with glances, a fist, a gunshot, a death. All in silence. It's only after this near-wordless ballet of violence that anyone speaks, and by then, the rules of this world are already laid bare. Welcome to the kind of Western that doesn't just unfold, it simmers. That doesn't just show you men with guns, but asks you what kind of men they are, and what they're willing to endure to protect what matters. At the center of it all is a sheriff with more grit than polish, a quiet strength that carries years of weathered choices. He's not the fastest draw, not the biggest presence, but he has something else, resolve. A patient, relentless kind of courage. When a rich rancher's brother shoots a man dead in cold blood, this sheriff arrests him without flinching. And with that single act, he sets into motion a story where the stakes only tighten, where the walls of the town, and morality, close in around him like a noose. The trouble is, the man behind bars isn't just any outlaw. He's part of a powerful family, one that controls the land and the law in equal measure. The sheriff knows help won't come from telegrams or townsfolk. And he's not expecting a cavalry. Instead, he builds his defense with the only people he trusts, one bullet-ridden step at a time. There's the deputy. A man who once had a badge and the backbone to wear it, but traded it for a bottle. He's haunted, hollowed out by shame, yet somewhere inside him still glows the dying ember of who he used to be. Their relationship isn't clean. It's not sentimental. The sheriff watches him fall and waits to see if he'll stand. Every interaction between them feels like a bet against the past. Then there's the young gunman. Cocky, smooth, too quick with his draw and too slow with his self-doubt. He's the kind of character who walks into a story thinking he's writing it, only to discover it's writing him. Underneath the charm is something quieter. Loss. He carries it in the way he tunes his guitar between gunfights. And the sheriff sees it. Maybe because he once carried it too. Add to that a grizzled old cripple whose bark is louder than his rifle, but whose loyalty runs deeper than his bones. He's the lookout, the comic relief, and the warning all at once. He doesn't trust easily, but when he does, he'd die for it. And rounding out the circle is a woman. She isn't a damsel. She isn't decoration. She's sharp, bruised by life, maybe more world-weary than anyone else in town. She doesn't carry a gun. She carries grace, and the dangerous ability to make a hardened man hesitate. This unlikely crew forms the heart of the story. They're not heroes in the traditional sense. They're flawed, tired, desperate. But when the jailhouse becomes a battleground, they don't run. They dig in. For days, they hold off hired guns and ambushes, knowing that the real threat isn't the man in the cell, it's the people who want him out. They wait for reinforcements that won't come. They bleed. They argue. They watch the doors and listen for footsteps in the night. The tension doesn't come from how many bullets are fired, it comes from how long it takes before a gun is drawn. From the silences. From the long walks through empty streets. From the way the sheriff checks his watch not for time, but for how long he has until the next test of his will. It's a slow burn, and that's the point. The film is less interested in spectacle than in honor. in how a man holds a line, not with bravado, but with belief. But make no mistake, it does crackle when it needs to. When the gunfights do come, they're fast, brutal, unglamorous. The camera doesn't romanticize violence. It captures the sharp flinch of impact, the recoil of choices made in half seconds. Every shot feels like it could be the last. And between the violence, there's music, not orchestral, but the kind played on front porches and in late-night corners. One scene, quiet and strange, shows the characters passing around a guitar, harmonizing in the dim glow of a lantern. It shouldn't work. It should feel out of place. But it does work. Because it reminds us what's at stake. That these aren't just lawmen and criminals, they're people. Tired, scared, hopeful, capable of laughter, of vulnerability, of softness, even in the middle of danger. And that's what the story returns to, again and again, humanity. It lingers on the quiet moments, the way the sheriff's hands tremble just slightly as he loads his gun. The way the deputy stares into his whiskey like it's a mirror. The way the woman looks at the sheriff and sees both the man he is and the man he's trying not to become. Every character has a shadow, a past. And it's those shadows that stretch across every scene, long and unblinking. As the climax builds, the siege tightens. The town turns cold. Night falls again and again, and with each darkness, another test arrives. The villains aren't mustache-twirling caricatures. They're rich, organized, patient. They wait outside town, circling, knowing their man is behind bars, and betting on fear to do their work for them. But what they don't count on is resolve. The sheriff holds. The broken deputy sobers up, not because of inspiration, but because he has to. The young gun finally learns that speed is nothing without cause. The woman, once prepared to leave, stays. And when the final standoff comes, when dynamite is rolled down alleyways and bullets ring through empty streets, it's not just survival they're fighting for. It's dignity. It's the principle that some things are worth holding the line for, even if you stand alone. Or worse, with only the broken at your side. There are no grand speeches. No sweeping gestures. Just a few good people doing their best with what they have, in a world that's already begun to forget what that means. And by the time the dust settles, nothing has changed, and yet everything has. The town is still quiet. The jail is still standing. But the people, their choices, their scars, they carry the cost. What's left is something deeper than a happy ending. It's a question. One that echoes in the silence after the final shot. What do you stand for when no one is left to see it? This story answers with action, with restraint, with slow-burning integrity. It teases you with danger, disarms you with humor, and then surprises you with its soul. And that, more than gunfights or standoffs or saloon showdowns, is what makes it endure. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do isn't to fight. It's to wait. To hold steady while the storm circles. To be the last good thing in a place that's about to forget what good even means. And somewhere in the dry heat of the frontier, in a jailhouse that becomes a crucible, that kind of bravery is put to the test, slowly, relentlessly, until what's left is a story you never quite forget. It begins with silence, and not the kind that comforts. The kind that presses. Heavy. Thick. A saloon in the late afternoon sun, still as a photograph, its worn floorboards groaning faintly under the weight of expectation. The kind of place where people drink with their eyes down, where laughter used to live but has long since packed its bags. Through the swinging doors comes a man. Dirty, slack-jawed, stumbling not from fatigue but from a thirst that's hollowed him out. He moves like he doesn't belong in his own skin anymore. His name is Dude. Once a lawman. Now barely even a man. He makes his way to the bar without words, trembling hands searching for the one thing he thinks will set him right again. But before the drink reaches his lips, another hand interrupts the ritual. A coin, tossed cruelly onto the counter. The sound of it clinks too loudly in the silence. It's a taunt. A joke. The man who threw it leans back, amused by his own arrogance. He's no outlaw, not in the traditional sense. His name is Joe Burdett. A local. Entitled. Dangerous not because of skill or cunning, but because he thinks he's untouchable. The moment combusts. Dude lunges. Joe retaliates. A man tries to step in, innocent, calm, just trying to keep peace, and is shot dead for it. The chaos breaks the saloon's uneasy quiet, and into the smoke and tension strides another figure. Tall. Steady. A badge gleaming beneath a dusty coat. The sheriff. His name is Chance. John T. Chance. He arrives too late to stop the killing. But not too late to enforce the law. Joe Burdett is arrested on the spot, marched through the street like a trophy and thrown into the county jail. It should be a clean ending. Justice served. But nothing is ever that simple in a town where power doesn't wear a badge. It rides on money and fear. Burdett's brother Nathan owns most of what matters around here. Land, men, influence. And it doesn't take long before it becomes clear that the real battle isn't over the murder, it's over the holding. Chance has Joe in a cell. But the bars aren't as strong as the pressure building outside them. The sheriff knows what's coming. He's got to hold that cell for 6 days, 6 long, dangerous days, until the U.S. Marshal arrives to take Joe to trial. But that's 6 days for Nathan Burdett to send hired guns. 6 days for fear to creep in. 6 days for a town to decide whether it stands with the law or runs from it. So, Chance does what any proud, stubborn, outnumbered man would do. He digs in. He doesn't call for help. He doesn't panic. He chooses his people carefully. And what he ends up with is not a posse of perfect men, but a group of broken, complicated ones who might just be strong enough to hold together when everything else is falling apart. There's Dude. Once the best shot in the county. Sharp. Smart. Respected. Until whiskey got him by the throat and wouldn't let go. He's been a joke in this town for 2 years. People mock him, pity him. Some don't even remember his name. They call him Borashan. Drunk. He knows it. Carries the shame like a brand. But when Chance offers him a place, if he can stay sober, he takes it. Not out of gratitude. Out of desperation. To prove there's still something in him worth trusting. Dude's first step back into the law is shaky. His hand trembles when he lifts a rifle. His voice catches when he speaks. But something in him is waking up. And Chance, who sees what's still buried beneath the wreckage, watches with the patience of an old friend who never fully turned away. Then there's Stumpy, the jail's caretaker. A wiry, half-crippled old man with a temper as loud as his rifle. He's not much to look at. Can't chase anyone down. Can't shoot without leaning on something. But he's got fire, loyalty, and eyes that miss nothing. He guards that jail like it's the last thing keeping the world upright. Shouting from behind bars, scowling at everyone, always ready with a sarcastic barb or a bucket of hot coffee. But when the threats come, when the Burdett men start prowling, he's the one who stays up all night with a shotgun on his lap. And then there's Colorado. Young, fast, cooler than he lets on. He plays guitar and wears his confidence like armor, all while pretending not to care. But there's depth under the swagger. A sense of right and wrong he tries not to show. He works for a traveling wagon team, hauling supplies and songs from town to town. But when things turn dark and bullets start to replace words, he doesn't run. He listens, learns, picks his side. His friendship with Dude becomes one of the film's quieter triumphs. A relationship built not on speeches, but on respect. When Dude falters, Colorado doesn't scold, he steadies. When Colorado steps into danger, Dude doesn't warn, he walks with him. It's a quiet brotherhood that grows in the shadows of gunfights and doubt. Amid all this, in the backdrop of mounting tension and tightening noose, a woman arrives. Feathers. That's all she's called. A stage performer, drifting into town with too much past and not enough future. She plays cards, sings, laughs like she's trying not to cry. The moment she meets Chance, the air shifts. They don't flirt, they parry. Their chemistry isn't sweet. It's electric. Two wounded, guarded people sizing each other up, daring the other to blink first. Feathers sees something in Chance, a man hiding behind duty. And Chance sees something in her, a woman who won't beg for kindness but aches for it all the same. Their scenes together break through the grit, offer brief glimpses of softness. And in a film about guns and grit and masculine honor, they remind you that tenderness can exist in the middle of war. But the town is changing. The streets grow quieter. Shopkeepers nod with nervous glances. Strangers gather in corners, watching. Burdett's men begin arriving in twos and threes, silent, armed, confident. They don't attack. Not yet. They wait. That's their game. Psychological warfare. Let the sheriff and his ragtag crew wear themselves out. Let the fear sink in. Let the town turn against them. A message comes. Not in words, but in action. A body, beaten and dumped in the alley. A warning shot fired near the jail. A horse stolen. Supplies cut off. Each act is a whisper. Give him up. Chance says nothing. His answer is in how he stands, how he never locks the jail's front door, how he walks the same patrol every night without flinching. But the pressure is mounting. Dude slips. One night, the bottle almost finds his hand again. He fights it off, barely. Colorado finds him, doesn't lecture, just hands him a cup of coffee and stands nearby. Stumpy, half asleep with a rifle across his knees, mutters that no man can stay awake forever. And Feathers, watching from the shadows of her boarding room, keeps trying to read Chance like a riddle she might regret solving. Tensions explode when a wagon arrives. Harmless, at first. Just goods. Maybe supplies. But inside is a hidden gunman, waiting for the right moment. Dude, ever watchful, sees something off. His instincts flare. For a second, you wonder if he's imagining it, if the old drunk is still seeing ghosts. But no. He's right. What follows is fast. Brutal. A shootout that cracks the town's fragile silence wide open. Bullets through crates. A horse rearing. Colorado draws. Stumpy fires from the jailhouse window. Chance moves like a ghost, precise and cold. When the smoke clears, the threat is gone, but so is the illusion of safety. There's no more waiting. The siege has begun. And somewhere in the stillness that follows, as the jail doors creak and the stars burn above, Chance knows the worst is yet to come. Not because he doubts his men, but because the kind of courage they've shown so far will have to last for a very long time. And courage, like everything else, runs thin when no one's watching your back. The tension doesn't rise with sound. It deepens in the silence. The town is still. Its buildings cast long shadows in the late afternoon sun. Doors stay shut. Windows peek open for just a moment, then close again. The kind of quiet that hums with danger. Everyone knows what's coming, and no one wants to get caught in the middle of it. In the jailhouse, Chance stands with a rifle resting lightly in his hands, watching the door, not because he expects it to open, but because if it does, someone might not survive. Inside the cell, Joe Burdett leans back on the cot, arms behind his head, smirking like he knows something no one else does. He's calm. Too calm. Because he's been told what's going to happen. Nathan, his brother, has promised he'll walk free. Promised it with gold, with guns, with men. And those men have arrived. They're in the hotel. In the alleyways. On rooftops. waiting for the signal, waiting for the final push. But Chance hasn't moved. He still patrols the same route, eats the same canned beans, speaks with the same steel voice. The kind that tells you he's already decided. He's not letting Burdett go. Not for threats, not for bullets, not even if it kills him. And then comes the first crack. A message, brief, chilling, arrives with a thud. Carlos, the hotel owner and friend to Chance, delivers it with a worried glance. One of Nathan Burdett's men has taken a hostage. A quiet young woman. No one important to the outside world. But to the sheriff and to Dude, she's everything. It's one of the dancers. A girl named Consuela. Sweet. Shy. She's never fired a gun, never asked for trouble. But now she's bait. If Chance wants to see her alive, he'll trade Joe. The terms are simple, cruel, and absolutely unacceptable. But it works. For a moment, the resolve shakes. Dude is the first to react. He wants to go after her, even if it means walking into a trap. Colorado stops him. Chance says nothing. He's weighing it all. Not just the life in danger, but the ripple that would follow. If they give in now, they've lost everything. The law. The town. Themselves. Still, they have to try something. What follows is one of the tensest scenes in the entire story. Not a gunfight, but a rescue attempt done under cover of darkness and desperation. They sneak through alleys, scaling back entrances. Colorado watches the rooftops while Dude, rifle in shaking hands, slips through the shadows. He's sober now. Sharp. Focused in a way he hasn't been in years. And when the moment comes, when he sees the thug guarding Consuela, half asleep by a lamplight, he doesn't hesitate. He knocks him cold. No killing. Just precision. Fast, clean, quiet. They get her out, back to safety. A small victory, but one that emboldens them. The men realize something important. They can do this. They don't have numbers, but they have heart. They have each other. Nathan doesn't take the news well. From his mansion at the edge of town, he sends word again. This time with more threat. No more hostages. No more waiting. They want a prisoner exchange. They've taken Dude. No one knows how. Maybe they followed him. Maybe he wandered too far. Maybe he was just too tired. Doesn't matter now. They have him. And they give the sheriff a simple ultimatum. Trade Joe for Dude before sunrise, or start digging graves. This is the real test. The man who had fallen, who had clawed his way back, who had proven to himself and to everyone else that redemption was possible, he's now the bargaining chip. And Chance, stone-faced and still, has to make a decision. He doesn't blink. He tells Stumpy to watch the jail. He tells Colorado to get some rest. And then he does something unexpected. He goes to Feathers. She's been a background figure, circling the chaos, watching with sharp eyes and a bruised heart. But now he lets her in. They talk. Not about tactics. About fear. About how she's tired of running. How he's tired of holding everything up alone. There's a softness in the scene, one of the only ones without a gun nearby. It reminds you what all this fighting is for. Not for pride. For people. For lives worth living. At dawn they ride out. Not with an army. Just Chance and Colorado. 2 against a dozen. But they have a plan. They approach the warehouse where Dude is held. A trap, clearly. Snipers on the roof. Hidden shooters in the windows. But they've studied the layout. Chance knocks on the door like it's a polite call, and then, boom, Stumpy fires a shot from afar, a distraction. Colorado moves. Smoke. Noise. Confusion. It's fast, brutal, clean. And inside, Dude turns the tide. They thought he was broken. But when they untied his hands, they gave him a chance. He grabs a gun, takes down 2 men before they can react. He fights his way out, joining Chance and Colorado as they run back to the jail. They make it. Barely. Scratched, battered, but alive. Nathan is finished playing. He assembles his men. Dozens now. Armed. Mounted. They surround the jailhouse like wolves circling prey. Inside, Stumpy stacks dynamite near the windows. Colorado checks his rifle. Dude sits on the floor, breathing hard, a wet cloth pressed to his temple. And Chance? He watches. There's no last stand speech. No swelling music. Just eyes meeting eyes. Then comes the final storm. Bullets rain. The jailhouse shakes. A wagon bursts into flames. Stumpy lights the fuse on the dynamite and throws it just as the front door caves in. Boom. Smoke. Screams. Chaos. The lawmen fight like devils. Each shot is deliberate. No waste. They defend every inch like it's sacred ground. And then, just as quickly as it began, it ends. Nathan is captured. His men scatter. The jail still stands. And in the smoldering quiet that follows, the town begins to stir. Doors open. People step outside. No applause. Just quiet nods. Respect. The law held. The good men didn't break. Later, as the dust settles, Chance walks Feathers to the stagecoach. He doesn't say much. Neither does she. But the way they look at each other says everything. Maybe she stays. Maybe he goes with her. Doesn't matter. What matters is they see each other now. And Dude? He walks down the street with his head up. The bottles behind him. Redemption earned not through words, but through fire. Through standing when it would have been easier to fall again. They're not heroes. Just people who chose to do the hard thing when it counted. And maybe that's the real story. Not the shootouts. Not the jail. But the quiet kind of courage that holds the line. And refuses to let go. There's something that happens when characters are drawn not from blueprints, but from bruises, when their choices grow out of regret, memory, and hope rather than archetypes. In this story, the people who hold the line against chaos don't do it because they're invincible. They do it because they've already lost something and refuse to lose more. Each character carries a past, some visible, some buried. And together, they form a constellation of flawed, defiant humanity, orbiting around a single point of principle. Hold steady, no matter the cost. At the center is John T. Chance, the sheriff with the slow drawl and the steel resolve. He isn't a man of speeches. He doesn't bark orders or deliver sermons. He just is. A presence carved out of dust and duty, shaped by years of keeping the peace in a town that never quite respects him until it needs him. He doesn't wear his badge with pride. He wears it with responsibility. And that distinction is everything. What makes Chance unforgettable isn't bravado. It's restraint. He knows he's outnumbered. He knows backup isn't coming. And yet, he refuses to hand over a prisoner. Not because he's stubborn, but because he understands what happens when the law bends to power. Once you give in, the town doesn't get safer, it gets smaller. More fearful. Less worth protecting. So he holds the jailhouse not like it's a building, but like it's the soul of the town itself. But Chance isn't perfect. He's isolated, emotionally cut off, almost to a fault. He doesn't let people in. Not really. Which is why his interactions with Feathers matter so much. With her, you see the cracks. The man underneath the badge. The tired eyes. The fear he'll never admit. And that makes him human. You don't admire him because he's strong. You believe in him because he hurts and still doesn't waver. Then there's Dude. Deputy. Drunk. Once a legend, now a warning. A man who traded pride for a bottle and lost everything in the trade. In the first scenes, he's pitiful, digging in spittoons for coins, beaten and mocked in the streets, his badge long since rusted. But under all that shame is a flicker, a spark. He remembers what it was like to matter. And that memory drives him to crawl his way back. His journey is the heart of the film's emotional arc. Watching Dude dry out isn't easy. It's jagged, painful, humiliating. But he keeps getting up. Every time he's tempted, someone, Chance, Colorado, stands beside him. Not with pity, with expectation. Because they know what he's capable of. His return to form isn't about one triumphant moment. It's slow, quiet, built scene by scene. The tremble in his hand when he holds a rifle again. The hesitation before walking into danger. And finally, the calm, focused bravery when he rescues a hostage or holds the line during the final siege. He becomes who he was not because the film redeems him, but because he redeems himself. And that's the key. Redemption in this story isn't a gift. It's earned, one breath at a time. Colorado stands as the contrast to Dude. Young, confident, stylish. A sharpshooter with a gambler's charm and a singer's soul. He plays the guitar like a man who's seen too much and wants to forget it for just a few minutes at a time. On the surface, he's the cool one. Detached. Neutral. He says he doesn't want to get involved. But that's a lie. Colorado is watching everything. Listening. Measuring. And slowly, he chooses a side. Not because he's forced to, but because he realizes that a man has to stand for something. His decision to fight alongside Chance and Dude isn't just an act of loyalty, it's a coming of age. He stops being a drifter and becomes a defender. Not of the law. Of people. He believes in them. And in that belief, he becomes essential. Then there's Stumpy. Old. Crippled. Cranky. The kind of character who would be comic relief in another film. But here, he's the soul of the jailhouse. He can't run. Can't fight in the streets. But he's always ready. Rifle loaded. Voice sharp. Heart unshakable. He watches over the prisoner like it's personal. And maybe it is. Stumpy's loyalty is so complete it becomes invisible. He's the one who never falters. When the others are exhausted, doubting, bleeding, Stumpy is still at his post. He might curse you out. He might yell until his voice cracks. But he's there. Solid. Unflinching. He reminds everyone that courage isn't about youth or strength. It's about commitment. His bond with Dude is particularly moving. He never stops believing in him. Not for a second. Even when everyone else sees a drunk, Stumpy sees the man he used to be. And maybe that belief helps pull Dude back from the edge. And then there's Feathers. She arrives with mystery, wrapped in silk and smoke, a woman with too many pasts and no clear future. She plays cards. Wears feathers in her hair. Flirts with danger like it's a game. But none of it is what defines her. What defines her is the seeing. She sees Chance. Not the sheriff. The man. The loneliness. The weight he carries. And she pushes past it with grace, not force. Feathers isn't looking for a savior. She's not waiting for a hero. She's already saved herself 100 times over. What she wants is something simple and impossibly hard. Truth. She wants Chance to admit that he needs someone. That he's tired. That he feels. And when he finally does, barely, awkwardly, it's enough. Their relationship isn't wrapped in grand gestures. It's built in glances. In the way she takes his hat and he lets her. In the way he almost smiles when she teases him. It's two people who have been hardened by life, trying to soften in each other's presence without shattering. Joe Burdett, the man in the cell, doesn't get much screen time. But he doesn't need it. His presence hangs over the entire story like a storm cloud. Arrogant. Cold. Entitled. He's not charismatic. He doesn't justify his actions. He's just a spoiled, dangerous man who knows his brother will send others to fight for him. He becomes the symbol of what unchecked power looks like, how violence can be used not out of desperation, but out of boredom. And Nathan Burdett, his brother, is the kind of villain that feels all too real. Polished, wealthy, calculating. He doesn't lift a gun. He doesn't dirty his hands. He pays others to do it. And in doing so, he becomes the shadow opposite of chance. A man who believes influence can replace honor. The contrast between Chance's ragtag defenders and Nathan's hired thugs is striking. One group is built on loyalty, the other on fear. One fights because it believes. The other fights because it's paid to. And when the bullets fly, it becomes clear which one holds the advantage. Not in numbers, but in spirit. Even the town itself is a character. Passive. Watching. For most of the film, it refuses to act. It hides behind curtains. Avoids eye contact. It's a community waiting for someone else to stand up. And yet, by the end, after the jailhouse holds, after the dust settles, there's a subtle shift. Doors open. People nod. A kind of quiet respect ripples through the streets. Because they saw what happened. And they remember. These characters aren't heroic in the traditional sense. They're messy, tired, stubborn. But that's what makes them matter. They're not saving the world. They're saving one square block of it. One jail. One principle. And in doing so, they remind us that sometimes the biggest battles happen in the smallest towns. That courage doesn't shout. It waits. That strength isn't in the draw, it's in the refusal to back down. That redemption isn't lightning, it's a slow rebuild, brick by broken brick. And in the faces of these characters, in their silence, their grit, their failures, and their quiet triumphs, you don't just find a story. You find something closer to life. Sometimes the strangest things about a film don't live inside the script. They live in the moments no camera was meant to capture. In the dusty air between takes, the muttered improvisations, the creaky studio doors, and the tensions behind smiles. For a film as solid and timeless as this one, you might expect its production to have been clean, efficient, even predictable. But the truth is, the making of this Western was just as textured and unexpected as the world it built on screen. It began, strangely enough, as an answer. A kind of cinematic rebuttal. Director Howard Hawks, along with screenwriter Jules Furthman, wasn't merely trying to make a movie. He was trying to correct something. Specifically, the way another film, High Noon, had portrayed lawmen and morality. Hawks didn't like the idea of a sheriff begging for help from cowardly townsfolk, only to be saved by his wife in the final hour. It didn't sit right with him. So he built his own story, about a man who refuses help, not because he doesn't need it, but because he wants the right kind of help. It wasn't a sequel. It wasn't a remake. It was a philosophy dressed in cowboy boots. And yet, while the film would become a kind of ideological touchstone, its production was anything but rigid. John Wayne, stepping into the role of Sheriff Chance, was no stranger to westerns. But something about this script hit different. He liked that it wasn't about grandstanding or sweeping vistas. It was about quiet strength, small moments, men who stood their ground for reasons. What's lesser known is that Wayne was battling his own internal conflicts at the time. Just a few years prior, he'd undergone major surgery for lung cancer. Some speculated he'd never return to full form. But there he was, strolling down dusty sets, commanding the frame, never once giving away how closely mortality had tapped on his shoulder. Dean Martin, cast as the tragic, alcoholic deputy dude, was a wild card. Most people knew him as a singer, a smooth crooner from the Rat Pack set. Few thought he could carry the weight of a character drowning in shame and struggling for redemption. But Hawks saw something beneath the surface. And what he got was a performance so honest, so raw, that it surprised even Martin himself. He later admitted that the role forced him to dig deeper than he ever had before. And audiences responded. Many still consider it his finest work. But not everything went smoothly. The studio wanted a musical number. Yes, a musical number. They had Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson, after all. Two recording stars. Why not put their voices to use? Hawks was reluctant. He didn't want the film to break its tone. But compromise was a lifeline in old Hollywood. And so the scene was written. Quiet, intimate, almost like a lullaby in the middle of a gunfight. The result? That impromptu guitar session between Martin, Nelson, and Walter Brennan, humming along like a memory. It shouldn't work. It slows everything down. But somehow, it does work. Because it humanizes the men behind the guns. Shows that even in war, there's room for music. Speaking of Ricky Nelson, his casting caused more than a few eyebrows to lift. He was a teen idol. Known more for being a heartthrob on the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet than for any experience with revolvers and saloons. The studio insisted. They wanted to pull younger audiences. Hawks gave in, but on one condition. Nelson had to learn to handle a gun convincingly. And so he did. Hours of practice. Quiet dedication. By the time filming began, Nelson could draw faster than most stuntmen. His role as Colorado turned out restrained, competent, and unexpectedly solid. He didn't try to steal scenes. He just fit. And then there was Walter Brennan. Cranky. Hilarious. Completely committed. Brennan played Stumpy with a blend of growl and warmth that became the film's emotional pressure valve. What audiences didn't know? That high-pitched, wheezy voice Brennan used, it wasn't natural. It was a choice. He believed the character needed to sound as broken as he looked. Hawks agreed. So Brennan kept it going even off-set. Some crew members later said they couldn't remember what his real voice sounded like anymore. Stranger still was the matter of Brennan's teeth, or lack thereof. He famously removed his false teeth to play Stumpy, wanting to sell the image of a rough, sun-baked old-timer. He also reportedly demanded control over his own wardrobe. He chose the hat, the scarf, the boots. Every detail felt personal to him. He became Stumpy so fully that some of the extras forgot they were acting around him. And yet, for all its strange quirks, the set itself was unusually quiet. Hawks ran a tight ship, not strict, but steady. He rarely yelled. He let the actors breathe. Let them explore. He was a director who believed in the rhythm of dialogue, the power of silence, and the weight of a glance. There were no big rehearsals. Just conversation. Sometimes, he'd rewrite lines the morning of shooting. Other times, he'd tell an actor to improvise. The most notorious example? And yet, for all its strange quirks, the set itself was unusually quiet. Hawks ran a tight ship, not strict, but steady. He rarely yelled. He let the actors breathe. Let them explore. He was a director who believed in the rhythm of dialogue, the power of silence, and the weight of a glance. There were no big rehearsals. Just conversation. Sometimes, he'd rewrite lines the morning of shooting. Other times, he'd tell an actor to improvise. The most notorious example? The scene where Chance slaps a gun out of Dude's hand and drags him out of the saloon. Martin was hesitant. He wasn't used to physical conflict on screen. Wayne, ever the professional, told him, "Just go with me. Don't think. React." And he did. What you see on screen is tension that wasn't entirely acting. It felt real because it was real. But perhaps the strangest fact of all is that this classic, deeply American film wasn't even shot in the actual Old West. Most of it was filmed on a soundstage and backlit sets at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, California. The street, the saloon, the jail, all carefully crafted illusions. Hawks didn't want the distraction of location shooting. He wanted control. And in that control, he created a world that felt just as dusty, dangerous, and alive as any stretch of Texas. Only a handful of exterior shots were done on location in Arizona, primarily in the old Tucson area. But even those were tightly framed to match the artificial sets. The blending is so seamless, most viewers never notice. It feels real. That's all that mattered. And while we're on the subject of sets, there's one bizarre bit of trivia worth mentioning. The jailhouse door was so old and stiff that it squeaked in every take. Rather than oil it or replace it, Hawks kept the squeak. He liked the sound. Said it added to the tension. And it does. Every time the door opens, that creak tells you something's about to happen. Even the props had stories. The rifles used by Wayne and Nelson were modified Winchester 1892 carbines. Hawks had them adjusted for faster loading and better hand-twirling. Nelson, in particular, practiced flipping his rifle behind the scenes until his knuckles bled. He didn't complain. He wanted to prove he belonged. Wayne's hat? The same one he wore in almost a dozen films. He called it, well, lucky. It had a sweat-stained band and a tiny tear near the brim, imperfections he insisted not be fixed. He believed they gave the character history. Behind the camera, cinematographer Russell Harlan shot most scenes with long lenses, compressing distance and giving the film its signature tight, intimate feel. He used light sparingly, low-key interiors, harsh shadows, a kind of noir sensibility trapped inside a Western. It was unconventional. But it worked. Even the music has a strange story. Dmitri Tiomkin, who scored the film, was known for his sweeping, emotional soundtracks. But for this one, he held back. Hawks told him, "Don't overplay. Let the scenes breathe." Tiomkin responded with a minimalist score that punctuates without overwhelming. One cue, just a few somber guitar notes, would later be echoed in countless westerns. And then there's the legacy. In later years, the film would be remade multiple times, sometimes directly, sometimes in spirit. El Dorado, starring Wayne again, was essentially a looser retelling. So was Rio Lobo. Hawks revisited the formula because he believed in it. Because it worked. Because it told the truth about courage and choice. But none of those retellings had the same quiet strangeness of the original. The moments that weren't supposed to happen. The improvised glances. The wheezing laugh of Walter Brennan. The surprising tenderness between gunfighters. The off-key duet in the middle of a siege. They weren't planned. They happened. And that's maybe the strangest fact of all, that a film born from a disagreement, cast with a crooner and a pop star, filmed on a fake street and under artificial skies, became something that felt more real than the very history it was built to reflect. It's proof that sometimes the things that shouldn't work are the ones that last the longest. That a sheriff, a drunk, a kid, and an old man with a limp can stand together in a jailhouse and remind us what matters. Not because they were perfect, but because they believed in something. And no matter what happened behind the scenes, every cracked rifle, every studio note, every accidental creak of the floorboards, that belief made it all come alive. There's a stillness that clings to certain films, not because they lack action, but because the weight of their choices hangs in the air like dust in a shaft of light. This film was never about spectacle. Its gunfights were brief, its plot straightforward, its setting confined. Yet critics, scholars, and filmmakers have returned to it again and again, not for the bullets, but for the silences between them. For what it says, not loudly, but with conviction, about masculinity, honor, fear, and the slow erosion of moral clarity in a world full of quick decisions. When it first opened, audiences took it in as a tight, classical Western. But even then, something felt different. The setup was familiar. A sheriff, a jail, a prisoner too valuable to remain unrescued. But what unfolded was more than just a siege. It was a meditation. Every decision made by the characters was delayed, weighed, considered. No one rushed. The suspense didn't come from relentless pace, but from hesitation. And in those pauses, the film found its soul. Critics noted this difference, though not all were sure how to define it. Howard Hawks had crafted westerns before, but this one stripped away the grandeur. Gone were sweeping desert panoramas or grand cavalry charges. In their place were tight interiors, narrow streets, sparse music. The jailhouse became the heartbeat of the film, still, controlled, under constant threat. And in keeping the action so confined, Hawks created a pressure cooker where character mattered more than movement. The tension wasn't built on what might happen next, but on whether these men would break under the strain. One of the most critically discussed moments is the saloon scene near the beginning. The attempted drink, the slap, the humiliation of Dude. Critics saw in it the first of many reversals of the standard Western arc. Here, the second lead isn't introduced as brave or competent, but as degraded, mocked, stripped of dignity. It's a brutal introduction. But it matters. Because the rest of the film becomes, in part, about whether that dignity can be reclaimed. Whether redemption, in a genre so often obsessed with punishment, is still possible. Dean Martin's performance was a revelation. At the time, he was not expected to carry such a heavy role. And yet, critics praised the subtlety he brought, the way his eyes tracked every bottle, the way his voice cracked at key moments, the way his body seemed to carry the weight of years lost. When Dude finally returns to himself, when he refuses the drink or takes up a rifle with steady hands, it isn't a sudden change. It's the culmination of something that has been happening in every scene, quietly, invisibly. And the fact that the film allows us to feel that transition without ever saying it outright, that's the mark of control, of discipline. John Wayne's Sheriff Chance was another point of critical conversation. Wayne was a giant, both in stature and in the mythos of American film. When Dude finally returns to himself, when he refuses the drink or takes up a rifle with steady hands, it isn't a sudden change. It's the culmination of something that has been happening in every scene, quietly, invisibly. And the fact that the film allows us to feel that transition without ever saying it outright, that's the mark of control, of discipline. John Wayne's Sheriff Chance was another point of critical conversation. Wayne was a giant, both in stature and in the mythos of American film. But here, he played a man more withdrawn, more uncertain than many of his past roles. He wasn't chasing outlaws across open plains. He was holding still, waiting, thinking. Some called it his most restrained performance. Others read it as Hawks' way of deconstructing the very idea of the Western hero, not by undermining it, but by slowing it down, showing the cost of it. One significant moment that sparked critical reflection was the conversation between Chance and Feathers. It's not romantic in the traditional sense. It's awkward, hesitant, full of unsaid things. Critics noticed how Hawks allowed that scene to stretch, to breathe, to sit in the discomfort of vulnerability. Chance, so in control with a rifle in hand, fumbles when asked to reveal his heart. And Feathers doesn't press. She just waits. The film, often praised for its male camaraderie, also makes space for emotional honesty between a man and a woman, and doesn't cheapen it with melodrama. Feathers herself became the subject of a broader discussion in feminist criticism. In a genre where women are often accessories to the hero's journey, she was neither helpless nor hardened. She was complicated. She had a past. She made her own choices. And her presence in the story, while never central to the action, reframed much of it. Critics noted that she challenges Chance, not with weapons, but with questions. With patience. With grace. Her role suggested that strength could look different. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay, even when every instinct tells you to run. The film's structure, too, was a subject of analysis. Hawks played with pacing in a way that defied convention. He let scenes run long. Let silence fill the frame. The infamous musical interlude, where the characters sing together in the jailhouse, baffled some critics at the time. What was this? A lull in the storm? A detour into sentiment? But over the years, that scene has been reassessed. It's now seen as essential, a reminder of who these men are when they're not being tested. It's not about music. It's about camaraderie. About the brief beauty of peace in the middle of impending violence. The gunfights, when they come, are quick and unsentimental. And that, too, drew critical attention. Hawks didn't glorify violence. He showed it as sudden, clumsy, fatal. No one dives in slow motion. No one delivers a speech before they shoot. The danger comes quietly, and then it's over. This realism, this refusal to glamorize, set the film apart in an era when many westerns still leaned into romanticism. But perhaps the most significant event, the one that shaped the film's legacy more than any single scene, was its political subtext. Though it was never overtly stated, many critics and scholars interpreted the film as a direct response to the atmosphere of the 1950s. The Red Scare, McCarthyism, and the blacklisting of Hollywood figures accused of communist sympathies. High Noon, made in 1952, was widely read as an allegory for that moment, a story of a man abandoned by his community in a time of need. Hawks and Wayne reportedly disliked High Noon's depiction of a sheriff seeking help and being betrayed. They saw it as un-American. So, in making this film, they offered a counter-vision. A sheriff who refuses help unless it comes freely. Who relies not on the town, but on a few loyal individuals. Who doesn't complain, doesn't plead, but holds the line quietly and without fanfare. For some, that made the film a conservative counterargument. For others, it was something deeper, a meditation on individual integrity in a time when institutions faltered. And this conversation only grew over the years. Film historians revisited the story again and again, asking what it said about community, responsibility, loyalty. Some saw it as an endorsement of stoic masculinity. Others saw it as a critique, pointing out how much these men suffer in silence, how little support they receive, how lonely that kind of strength becomes. The emotional resonance of the film rests, ultimately, in that loneliness. In the way Chance walks down an empty street, knowing no one will stand beside him unless they choose to. In the way Dude stares at his reflection in a broken mirror. In the way Colorado looks to the older men, searching for a kind of wisdom that the world no longer values. Even the ending refuses to offer simple closure. Yes, the bad guys are defeated. Yes, the jailhouse holds. But what's left is more ambiguous. Feathers and Chance walk away together, but not into the sunset. There's no triumph, no swelling music. Just another day, another job, another weight on the shoulders. That restraint is what critics have come to admire most. The refusal to give in to melodrama. The commitment to realism, even when it hurts. The insistence that character is not built in grand gestures, but in how a person behaves when no one's watching. As decades passed, the film's status grew. Directors like Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, and John Carpenter have all cited it as an influence. Carpenter's assault on Precinct 13 is a direct homage, transposing the siege into an urban setting but keeping the themes intact. Tarantino called it one of the tightest scripts ever written. And Scorsese praised its moral clarity. Film schools still teach it, not just as a Western, but as a case study in economy of storytelling. In how to create tension with nothing but dialogue and framing. In how to make every choice matter. Festivals and retrospectives have screened it in restored prints, often to sold-out crowds. And when audiences watch it today, they don't see a dusty artifact. They see something familiar. Something timeless. A story about standing firm, about trusting the right people, about knowing the difference between law and justice, and between bravado and real courage. It's a film that whispers its truths, that lets you sit with them. And in that whisper, in that stillness, it says more than 100 louder films ever could. It began like many great westerns do, not with a shootout or a stampede, but with a quiet question. Howard Hawks, the legendary director, was sitting with a growing sense of dissatisfaction. Something about the way Western heroes were being portrayed in the late 1950s didn't sit right with him. Films like High Noon showed lawmen begging for help, betrayed by townsfolk, saved not by their own hands, but by others. Hawks didn't buy it. He didn't believe in a sheriff who pleaded. He believed in a man who stood, steady and alone if need be, and did what had to be done. So he decided to make his own answer. His own version of what a Western, and what a Western hero, should be. And that answer would unfold slowly, methodically, behind the locked doors of a jailhouse and the tense silence of a town on edge. The process began in 1958 with a script that Hawks carefully molded, reworking it with screenwriter Jules Furthman. Together, they stripped away the noise. The idea was simple: a sheriff, a prisoner, and a siege. No sweeping landscapes. No endless chases. Just tension. Just time. Just character. From the start, Hawks knew who he wanted at the center of this slow-burn showdown. John Wayne. They had worked together before, and Hawks trusted Wayne, not just as a performer, but as an anchor. Wayne had the gravity, the presence, the mythic simplicity. More than that, he understood the kind of story Hawks wanted to tell. This wasn't about showmanship. It was about endurance. But casting the rest of the film would be a bit more unorthodox. For the role of Dude, the alcoholic deputy fighting for redemption, Hawks chose Dean Martin. At the time, Martin was better known for nightclubs and comedy routines with Jerry Lewis. A suave singer, a smooth operator, but hardly the image of a man wrestling with inner demons. Hawks saw something others didn't. He saw potential. And he was right. Martin showed up committed. Nervous, maybe, but focused. He studied the script with a kind of gravity that surprised everyone. There was no swagger, no stage persona. Just a man ready to fall apart in front of the camera. Martin's performance would end up becoming one of the most critically praised of his career. He later said it was the first time he felt like he was truly acting. But the casting choices didn't stop surprising there. Ricky Nelson, a teen heartthrob and pop star from the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, was brought in to play Colorado, a sharp-shooting young cowboy with a quiet edge. The studio pushed for Nelson's inclusion, hoping to draw younger audiences. Hawks was initially skeptical. Could a teen idol hold his own next to Wayne and Martin? He could. And did. Though Nelson had limited acting experience, he threw himself into the role. He trained with firearms experts, learned to ride convincingly, and practiced twirling his rifle until it became second nature. He didn't try to overact or steal scenes. Instead, he underplayed, letting his quiet confidence speak louder than any dialogue. And in the film, that subtlety made him feel real. The production itself was built around control. Hawks didn't want unpredictable weather or complicated travel logistics. So rather than shoot on remote locations, most of the film was made on a soundstage and the Warner Brothers backlit in Burbank, California. The town, the saloon, the jailhouse, they were all constructed from scratch. Hawks insisted on this because he wanted to control every detail. The lighting, the sound, the movement of characters. Every door creak and boot scuff was planned. That control paid off. Hawks was a master of blocking, of positioning his actors in ways that created drama without needing to cut or zoom. He'd rehearse scenes until every glance, every pause, felt organic. But he didn't micromanage emotion. Once the structure was in place, he let the actors bring the fire. Still, there were moments where fire got too real. During one scene, Brennan's character, Stumpy, fires a shotgun through a window at advancing gunmen. The timing of the squib, a small explosive used for special effects, was off by just a second, and part of the prop window blew out too close to Wayne's face. Hawks called cut and walked over, deadpan, asking if everyone still had their eyebrows. They did, but barely. Walter Brennan, as Stumpy, was a character both on and off screen. Known for his eccentricities, Brennan insisted on removing his false teeth to give Stumpy a more grizzled, sunken look. He also helped shape the character's gravelly voice, opting for a higher-pitched, wheezy tone that felt part comic, part tragic. Off-camera, Brennan was fiercely proud of his work, often walking around in full costume, staying in character between takes. And when it came time for the infamous musical moment, that soft, strange interlude where Martin and Nelson sing "My Rifle, My Pony and Me," there was some hesitation. Hawks didn't like musicals. He didn't believe in breaking the tension with a tune. But the studio wanted to capitalize on Martin's and Nelson's voices. Hawks compromised. He shot the scene without fanfare, like a lullaby whispered into the night. No dramatic lighting. No sweeping shots. Just 3 men, 1 guitar, and a fragile calm in the middle of chaos. And the result? It worked. Critics praised the moment for its intimacy. Audiences remembered it long after the credits rolled. What should have been out of place became the emotional hinge of the entire film. There were lighter moments, too. On set, Martin kept spirits high with jokes between takes, often teasing Wayne about his walk or his delivery. Brennan brought in a harmonica and sometimes played it between scenes, much to the annoyance of the sound department. Nelson, still young and a bit shy, often stayed quiet, watching the older actors like a student at school. One day, during a rehearsal for a shootout scene, Wayne playfully challenged Nelson to a drawing contest, who could unholster their gun faster. The crew gathered around. Cameras off. Nelson drew first. Clean, smooth, fast. Wayne followed, but his hand slipped. Everyone laughed. Nelson blushed. Wayne clapped him on the back and said, "Just don't let it go to your head, kid." Nelson never did. Behind the scenes, the film moved efficiently. Hawks was known for keeping a tight schedule. He didn't believe in wasting time. But he also wasn't a dictator. He trusted his team. His cinematographer, Russell Harlan, used light masterfully, often allowing shadows to dominate a frame. Hawks liked contrast. He believed the darkness around a character said as much as the lines they spoke. The jail set was built with full 360-degree rotation in mind. That meant the camera could move freely, following actors from cell to desk to doorway without needing to cut or change location. This gave scenes a sense of real-time flow. The audience never felt the seams. And though the film feels slow by today's standards, that pacing was intentional. Hawks wanted every moment to breathe. He once told Martin, "Don't be afraid of silence. Let the audience lean in." And they did. There's a lesser-known story about the final scene. Originally, Hawks had considered ending the film with a massive shootout, something bigger, louder, more climactic. But as the shoot went on, he changed his mind. He decided the real power of the story wasn't in explosions, but in the act of enduring. So instead of spectacle, he ended it with a decision, a quiet walk down a street, a final glance, and the unspoken relief of survival. And in doing so, he gave the film its lasting power. It wasn't about glory. It was about grit. When the film wrapped, Hawks threw a small party on set. Nothing fancy. A few drinks. A few toasts. Wayne gave a short speech. Martin sang a few bars of a cowboy ballad. Brennan, as always, played the harmonica. Nelson smiled from the corner, still half in costume. The film premiered in 1959 to strong reviews. Audiences embraced it. Critics were split. Some wanted more action, others praised the restraint. But over time, its reputation grew. Directors began citing it as a blueprint. Writers studied its pacing. Actors admired its honesty. It became more than a Western. It became a lesson in trust, between characters, between filmmaker and audience, between silence and sound. And all of it, the choices, the accidents, the arguments and harmonies, became part of its legend. Not carved in stone, but printed on celluloid, dusty and flickering, like a campfire story that never quite ends. It's the kind of town that doesn't even have a name you remember. Just a stretch of dirt street framed by sun-bleached wood, false fronts, and the thin clang of a bell tower that never seems to ring for the right reasons. Somewhere in the west, but not the mythic west of sweeping canyons and endless horizon, this is a confined west, narrow and boxed in by circumstance. A town surrounded not by nature, but by stillness. And in that stillness, danger waits. From the very first frame, the setting of this story doesn't shout. It doesn't paint with wide desert brushstrokes or romanticize the rugged frontier. Instead, it whispers. The dusty street is short, hemmed in by a few squat buildings that seem to lean with the weight of heat and age. The saloon isn't grand, it's tired. The jailhouse isn't fortified, it's vulnerable. And that vulnerability becomes the entire point. Because this isn't a western that sprawls. It tightens. The geography is simple, but the emotional topography is anything but. The town becomes a crucible. A single street, two main buildings, a few scattered alleys, and yet it holds more tension than any mountain range. It's not what's shown, it's what's not. What's beyond those corners, behind those doors, in the shadows. Most of the film unfolds in the same handful of locations. The jail, the saloon, the hotel, and the boardwalks that stitch them together. That compression creates intimacy. Claustrophobia. The audience is locked in the town just as the sheriff is locked into his decision. There's no place to run. No place to retreat. Only the question, will they hold out? And so the setting becomes psychological. Every space is more than just a place, it's a state of mind. Take the jailhouse. It's not grand. Just a single-room office, a few desks, and two barred cells. But once Joe Burdett is locked inside, the entire structure transforms. It becomes fortress and trap, courtroom and battlefield. The sound of boots on the wooden floorboards echoes like gunshots. The creak of the door becomes a warning. Even the ticking of a clock feels like a countdown. The lighting here is sparse, lamplight, often from a single source. It casts long shadows, isolates characters. You feel the pressure in every corner. Outside the jail, the saloon offers no refuge, only pretense. It's where dude falls, where humiliation begins. Its tables are chipped, its mirrors dirty, and its piano seems to play not for joy but habit. And yet it's also where he rises again, where he turns the corner. The visual contrast between his first scene there and his later ones is striking. Initially, the camera hangs wide and above, making him look small, exposed. Later, the frame tightens, showing his face in close-ups, his hand steady on the table. The same room. A different man. Then there's the hotel, gilded with just enough false elegance to feel out of place. It's where Nathan Burdett's men nest, watching from the windows, scheming in silence. The hotel is taller than the other buildings, its balcony offering a view of the entire town. That height, used sparingly by the camera, creates an invisible imbalance. The lawmen operate at ground level. The villains hover above. That vertical framing becomes symbolic. Those who pull the strings stay elevated, distanced, while those who carry the burden stay close to the dust. The use of space is deliberate. Most shots are composed to keep characters within tight frames. Dialogues are often shot in medium close-up, allowing expressions to do the heavy lifting. And when the camera moves, it moves with purpose. Slow dolly tracks that follow footsteps or deliberate pans that reveal more than the dialogue admits. The cinematography, guided by Russell Harlan, embraces shadows like old friends. Interiors are often dark, not in the grim sense, but in the way light naturally falls from oil lamps and windows. It's not theatrical, it's true. Sunlight filters through slats in wooden walls, casting striped patterns that shift as characters move. Night scenes are particularly potent. The darkness isn't just a backdrop, it becomes a character. It hides threats. It amplifies silence. It narrows the world to what you can see, and what you fear you can't. When action does spill into the street, the tone changes, but not drastically. Even the gunfights are shot with restraint. Quick cuts, real-time reactions, no slow motion or exaggerated sound. The violence is shocking because of its plainness. You feel every impact not because the camera lingers, but because it doesn't. The lens moves away like a witness, not a spectator. Then there's the color palette. The film was shot in rich Technicolor, but it doesn't explode with vibrancy. The tones are dusty, worn, practical. Browns, tans, soft reds, and grays dominate. The sheriff's coat, the jail's wood, the saloon's floor, all feel of a piece. There are no bright accents. Even Feathers, who might have been costumed in glittering gowns, wears dark, modest clothing that hints at a past she doesn't share. She blends in. But her presence, lit with slightly softer filters, gives her scenes a glow that sets her apart without needing sparkle. And that brings us to perhaps the most curious element of all, the music, or often, the lack of it. Dmitri Tiomkin's score is used with exquisite care. There is no constant orchestral undercurrent. Music enters like a guest, not a tenant. When it plays, it means something. The main theme, a slow, deliberate march with soft guitar, echoes the film's rhythm, patient, thoughtful, and never in a hurry. In action scenes, Tiomkin resists swelling drums or blaring brass. He prefers subtle cues. A single sustained note. A change in tempo. Silence is often louder. And when music does take center stage, like the famous scene with Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson strumming guitars in the jailhouse, it doesn't break the tone. It deepens it. The song isn't a showpiece. It's a pause. A breath. A reminder that these men, tough as they are, carry something human underneath. That even in the face of violence, they can find harmony, if only for a verse or two. These moments, fleeting, quiet, deeply cinematic, are what elevate the film beyond the simplicity of its setting. The visual grammar is careful. Characters are often framed in doors or windows, as if boxed by their choices. Conversations play out in long takes, giving tension time to build organically. There are no cheap tricks. Just shadows, silence, and the flicker of a flame. And it works because it's consistent. Every element, the narrow town, the tight frames, the deliberate lighting, the hesitant music, pulls in the same direction. It creates a mood that's not suspenseful in the way we often define it today, but in the way a poker game becomes suspenseful. Quietly. Slowly. With stakes that rise not in explosions, but in the narrowing of a man's eyes. The town, as small as it is, never feels like a backdrop. It feels like a pressure chamber, a place where time moves differently, where every step from jailhouse to saloon is a risk, where each corner might conceal a rifle, where the sheriff walks slowly, deliberately, not because he's unsure, but because he knows exactly what it costs to rush. In the end, the town itself becomes a character. It starts passive, watching, hiding, silent. But as the sheriff and his few allies hold the line, something shifts. Doors begin to open. Glances become nods. By the final act, it's not just the jailhouse that's been defended. It's the idea of the town itself. The belief that it's still worth saving. And that belief is reflected in the cinematography. In the way the final shots open up, ever so slightly. The frames get wider. The light grows warmer. The camera, once so tight and confining, begins to breathe again. Not much. But enough. Enough to let hope Indiana. So while the story is simple, the world it lives in is not. It's a world built with care. With shadows and silence. With footsteps and glances. With the kind of cinematography that doesn't call attention to itself, but leaves fingerprints on your memory. It's the kind of setting that doesn't just hold the story. It holds you too. You wouldn't know it, watching the finished film, but the set wasn't always as quiet as the dusty streets suggested. In fact, behind the locked doors of that jailhouse and the stretched-out silences of its gunfights, there was a storm of laughter, tension, late-night stories, forgotten lines, impromptu rehearsals, and moments so odd they'd later feel like myths. What was captured on screen was discipline and grit. But behind the camera, it was something far more human, an orchestra of quirks, egos, improvisations, and undeniable chemistry. The director, Howard Hawks, was a man who hated chaos, but he had a particular gift for orchestrating it just enough to make everything feel alive. His sets were known for being controlled but relaxed, focused but never forceful. He believed in his actors, trusted their instincts, and knew how to push them just enough without breaking them. But this project, from the very beginning, would test even his patience. John Wayne, the heart of the story, was at the height of his myth. Towering in both fame and stature, he brought not only star power but a deep sense of ownership. This was his kind of film. A story about standing firm, not begging for help, holding the line on your own 2 feet. Wayne believed in it wholeheartedly. But he also brought with him a quiet weight. He'd recently undergone surgery for lung cancer, a fact not many knew during production. It left him winded at times, though he refused to show weakness. Crew members would watch him retreat to his trailer between takes, catch his breath, sip water slowly, then stride back to set like nothing had ever been wrong. His grit was admired, even revered. But it wasn't just his strength that defined him on this shoot, it was his presence. Wayne commanded respect, but he never demanded it. He joked with the crew, nodded to extras, always seemed to know when someone on set was having a bad day. Still, he was sharp when he needed to be. One time, when a young assistant tripped over a cable and nearly ruined a take, Wayne didn't yell. He just glanced over, deadpan, and said, "Well, partner, you want a job behind the camera or under it?" Dean Martin, cast as the broken-down deputy, was a different rhythm altogether. Martin arrived on set with a reputation that preceded him. Playboy, rat-packer, singer, comedian. Not exactly the mold of a grizzled, recovering drunk. But Hawks had seen something in him. He believed Martin could play broken, could play haunted. And from day one, Martin proved him right. Still, the transition wasn't seamless. Martin was nervous. He hadn't done many serious roles and found himself second-guessing his performance. Hawks, in his quiet, confident way, never doubted him. "Just say the words," he told Martin, "and let your face do the rest." And it worked. The first few days were tense, with Martin asking for multiple takes, worried he wasn't capturing the right tone. But then came a scene in the saloon. Martin, slumped over the bar, desperate for a drink, humiliated by the sound of a coin hitting the spittoon. "One take." Hawks nodded. "That's it." And something clicked. Off camera, Martin kept things light. He'd sing between takes, joke with the extras, occasionally bring donuts to the early morning call times. One afternoon, he convinced the costume department to swap Wayne's hat for a slightly smaller one, just enough that it sat funny. Wayne wore it through half a rehearsal before realizing it and giving Martin a look that said, "You'll pay for that later." He did. Wayne got him back the next day by filling Martin's coffee thermos with lukewarm soup. Then there was Ricky Nelson. Young, quiet, and uncertain. The studio had insisted on casting him. He was a teen idol, the kind of name that would pull younger audiences. Hawks was skeptical. Nelson had charm, sure, but this was a film about tired men with too many regrets. Did he belong? Hawks approached him carefully. He didn't demand much, just authenticity. "Don't try to act," he told Nelson. "Just be still. Let them come to you." Nelson, ever the student, listened. He trained with stuntmen to master his gun twirl, spent hours learning to reload quickly, practiced his scenes in private so he wouldn't waste time on set. His guitar scenes were real. He played softly, earnestly, letting his music fill the quiet. The rest of the cast welcomed him, but often teased him for his squeaky clean image. One day, Brennan handed Nelson a cigar and said, "Smoke this before your next take. You'll look like you've lived a little." Walter Brennan was the wild card. Already a 3-time Oscar winner, Brennan came to set with more experience than anyone, and more quirks. He insisted on playing Stumpy as toothless, removing his dentures and speaking in a high-pitched wheeze that sometimes cracked up the crew mid-take. He mumbled, he shouted, he cackled with glee. Hawks adored him. "Let Brennan be Brennan," he said more than once. Brennan and Wayne had a kind of familial bond. They argued like old friends, occasionally poking fun at each other's politics, delivery, or hat size. But their respect was absolute. Brennan, despite his hunched posture and limping gait, was razor-sharp. He often caught continuity errors before the script supervisor. One day, during a rehearsal, he pointed out that the jail cell door was missing a bolt it had in the previous scene. "How am I supposed to lock the bad guy in with half a hinge?" he grumbled. Even the crew wasn't immune to strange moments. The sound team often battled with the ambient noise from nearby sets. One afternoon, during a particularly quiet scene, a comedy production 2 stages over started blasting show tunes for their lunch break. Hawks shut down production for half an hour, then calmly walked over to the other set, peeked in, and said, "Boys, we're trying to catch a man dying in silence next door. Can you lower the chorus line?" Then there was the matter of the jailhouse door. It squeaked. Badly. Every time it opened, it let out a groan like it was dying. The crew tried to fix it. WD-40, replacement hinges, everything. Hawks stopped them. "Leave it," he said. "Let it speak." The door stayed, and that creak became part of the film's atmosphere, a small sound that added tension every time someone stepped in or out. Weather, ironically, was never an issue, because most of the film was shot indoors. Hawks wanted control. He didn't want the desert dictating his schedule. So he built the town on a backlit. Every storefront, every window, every alleyway was crafted with purpose. The buildings weren't just set dressing, they were part of the story. The narrow street amplified the sense of claustrophobia. The lack of space mirrored the sheriff's lack of options. Even the lighting, carefully orchestrated through slatted windows and low-hanging lanterns, was designed to feel real. There was one day, though, when the skies over Burbank opened up with a rare thunderstorm. Hawks, instead of calling off production, shifted gears. He filmed interiors. Jailhouse scenes. Feathers reading quietly while the wind whispered through the slats. The crew adjusted. Lights were moved, dialogue was changed on the spot, and somehow the storm outside made its way into the tension inside. Hawks never wasted a moment. Feathers, played by Angie Dickinson, brought a different energy. Younger than her co-stars by a fair margin, Dickinson was elegant, whip-smart, and perfectly aware that she was walking into a boys' club. But she held her ground. Hawks adored her. He gave her lines that had bite, that teased and challenged Wayne's stoic sheriff. Off-screen, she and Wayne shared an easy rapport. She'd poke fun at his slow delivery. He'd tease her for wearing high heels on a dirt set. Dickinson later recalled that one of the hardest scenes to shoot was a quiet conversation in a hotel room. The lighting had to be just right, soft, shadowy, intimate. Hawks took 2 hours to light it, tweaking lantern placements and reflective panels. When the scene finally rolled, it was near perfect. Dickinson delivered her lines with quiet precision, and Wayne, in one of his rare moments of cinematic vulnerability, let his character's armor slip, just for a breath. And that's what the whole production felt like. A series of moments, some funny, some frustrating, some deeply human, woven together under the watch of a director who understood that sometimes the best performances aren't the loudest. Sometimes they come in a glance, a hesitation, a door creaking open. When the final days of shooting arrived, the cast felt it. The set had become a home of sorts. The jailhouse, dusty and warm. The saloon, filled with echoes. They'd built something real, and they knew it. On the last day, Martin brought champagne. Wayne raised a glass. Brennan toasted with coffee. Nelson strummed one last quiet tune. And Hawks? He simply nodded and said, "That'll do." And it did. What they captured was lightning in a bottle. A Western not about guns, but about grace. Not about the myth of the frontier, but about the reality of holding a line when no one else will. And behind that story was another, a story of collaboration, of jokes traded in the shadows, of rainstorms and broken hinges and unlikely harmonies. The kind of story that, like the film itself, lingers long after the lights go out. Some stories wear their themes on their sleeves, loud, clear, spelled out in speeches and showdowns. Others keep them buried, tucked between glances and gunshots, waiting for the attentive to find them. This story belongs to the latter. It never tells you what it's about. It shows you, slowly, methodically, in every silence that stretches too long, every step taken down a lonely street, every choice that feels heavier than the gun that follows it. It doesn't teach. It doesn't preach. It just holds a mirror up to something ancient, the question of who you are when no one is left to applaud you for it. At the surface, the narrative is simple. A sheriff holds a killer in jail while the outlaw's powerful brother tries to bust him out. But beneath that is something deeper, a study of endurance, loyalty, redemption, and the loneliness of standing on the right side of the line when most others have stepped back. The town may be small, but the themes inside it are vast. And they unfold not with bombast, but with stillness. At the center is the theme of duty without recognition. John T. Chance, the sheriff, isn't admired. He's not lionized by the town. He's not even particularly liked by most. But he carries the badge anyway. Not because it gives him power, but because it costs him something. He stands for law in a place where the law is paper-thin, and he knows that if he gives an inch, everything crumbles. He's not fighting for glory. He's fighting because it's right. This theme runs through the film like a low, steady drumbeat. There are no parades for Chance. No cheers. Just quiet resistance and the threat of being outnumbered. Yet he holds. His refusal to give up Joe Burdette isn't just stubbornness, it's a stand-in for something bigger. He won't let fear make the rules. And that, in the world of this story, makes him both noble and isolated. It's this isolation that introduces one of the film's most persistent emotional undercurrents, loneliness in virtue. Chance is surrounded by people, but he carries something none of them fully understand. When he walks from the jail to the hotel or the saloon, the camera often lingers on his footsteps. Alone. Echoing. It's the sound of someone bearing the weight of a town that won't lift a finger. And that loneliness isn't just external, it's emotional. He's closed off, guarded. Even when Feathers tries to reach him, he resists. Because connection means vulnerability. And vulnerability in his world is a crack in the armor. This theme is symbolized most clearly in the jailhouse itself. A literal space of confinement, but also a metaphor for the burdens that the sheriff chooses to bear. It's where he spends most of his time, where the moral line is drawn. It's not just a building, it's a crucible, a place where every test unfolds, where every ally reveals what they're really made of. The jail isn't protection, it's a statement. And by standing inside it, Chance says, "This is where I make my stand." Then comes the theme of redemption, not as a reward, but as a process. Dude, the fallen deputy, is the embodiment of that journey. He starts broken, lost. The town calls him Borachon, drunkard. He scrambles for coins in spittoons. His fall is not subtle, but it's honest. And it's in the honest unraveling that his return becomes powerful. The film doesn't give him an easy path. Every step toward sobriety is painful. Every scene is another chance to falter. But with each choice, to pick up a gun, to walk into danger, to not drink, he builds himself back. Dude's redemption is mirrored in the physical details of the film. When he first appears, he's often framed from above, diminished by the lens. But as he reclaims himself, the camera begins to meet him at eye level. He stands taller. His lines become firmer. His hands steadier. The transformation isn't just written, it's seen. The symbolism of water plays quietly but powerfully through his arc. Water, often tied to cleansing and renewal, becomes a quiet motif. He's dunked in a trough early on, humiliated. Later, he's seen wiping his face with cold water, trying to sober up. Each time, it's a moment of reckoning, of confronting what he's become. By the end, water isn't his enemy. It's his mirror. Then there's Colorado. Young, talented, detached. And then there was the camera itself. It didn't rush. It didn't jolt. Hawks preferred long takes when possible, letting his actors settle into a rhythm. He trusted performance over montage, dialogue over spectacle. That meant fewer cuts, more movement within the frame. When Chance walks from the desk to the cell, it's one fluid motion. When Dude inspects a suspicious wagon, the tension builds not from editing, but from the camera staying with him, shoulder to shoulder, breath for breath. But none of this would have mattered without the sound design. And here, Hawks made choices that remain radical even today. Much of the film is quiet. Painfully so. There's very little score under dialogue. Conversations unfold in near silence. The tick of a clock. The scrape of boots. The rattle of a doorknob. These aren't just background details, they're tension. Every sound becomes significant. Every creak could be a threat. The silence forces you to lean in, to listen, to feel the pressure building under every calm word. When music does arrive, it does so with purpose. Dmitri Tiomkin's score is sparse and deliberate. There are no sweeping orchestral swells. No trumpets blaring before showdowns. Instead, Tiomkin leans into simple motifs, guitar, harmonica, slow orchestral phrases that drift in and out like thoughts. The main theme, soft and unhurried, sets the emotional tone. This isn't a film about victory. It's about endurance. About patience. The jailhouse song, My Rifle, My Pony and Me, isn't just a musical interlude. It's a narrative pause. A moment of emotional relief. And it's filmed simply. No camera tricks. No dramatic lighting. Just Martin, Nelson, and Brennan, relaxed in the glow of oil lamps, sharing something human before the inevitable storm. Hawks lets the moment sit. No commentary. Just honesty. Editing, led by Falmer Blankstead, followed Hawks' philosophy. Less is more. Scenes breathe. Cuts are purposeful. The pace is deliberate, not sluggish, but thoughtful. Blankstead resisted the urge to quicken the tempo, even when the tension spiked. Instead, he trusted the audience to sit with the moment, to feel it fully. The most suspenseful scenes aren't rapid-fire montages. They're slow walks down quiet corridors, eyes scanning the horizon, fingers tightening on triggers. One scene in particular, where Dude notices water dripping from the ceiling above a suspicious wagon, demonstrates the brilliance of Hawks' editing rhythm. The scene stretches just long enough to make your heart race. Not because of anything happening, but because of what might. It's the film's heartbeat. Small moments, stretched tight, vibrating with danger. Costume and production design added another layer of understated realism. Wardrobe choices weren't glamorous. They were lived in. John Wayne's hat, famously battered and sweat-stained, had been used in multiple films. He insisted on keeping it for continuity, not between scenes, but between characters. The hat knows the part, he joked. Brennan removed his dentures to create a more convincing look for Stumpy. Martin's clothing subtly evolved with his character, wrinkled and disheveled in the beginning, tidier as he finds his resolve. Sets were designed to be functional. The jail wasn't just a backdrop, it was practical, with working doors, real bars, and enough space to allow characters to move naturally. The saloon felt sticky and tired, not theatrical. The hotel was built taller, giving villains a literal and symbolic height advantage. Even the street, short and narrow, was a deliberate choice, to limit escape, to force confrontation. All of this, every technical decision, worked in service of mood. This wasn't a film about a town under siege. It was a film about a man under siege. About what happens when you refuse to back down, even when you're alone. The tension wasn't in the standoff, it was in the waiting. In the shadows between movements. And Hawks used every tool in his filmmaker's kit to create that mood without ever breaking its rhythm. And the result? Well, the box office answered that question. The film opened in 1959 to strong reviews and steady business. It didn't explode into theaters like a blockbuster. It settled in. Quietly. Confidently. Just like the story it told. Word of mouth did the rest. Audiences responded not to the gunplay, but to the relationships. The way these men, flawed, tired, stubborn, stood together because it was the right thing to do. It grossed solid numbers domestically, eventually earning back more than double its production budget. But its real legacy wasn't in its opening weekend. It was in the afterglow. It became a favorite for critics, for filmmakers, for audiences who returned to it again and again. It became a template. Directors like Quentin Tarantino, John Carpenter, and Walter Hill all cited it as inspiration. Carpenter's assault on Precinct 13 was essentially a modern-day remake in spirit. Tarantino has called it one of the most tightly crafted films ever made, admiring its restraint, its character focus, and its refusal to pander. It didn't rely on a twist ending or a grand reveal. Its triumph was cumulative, a slow gathering of trust, tension, and principle. It didn't teach you what to feel. It invited you to feel it on your own. And that invitation, made through Hawks' quiet craftsmanship, has endured. Because the truth is, films like this aren't made often. Not because they're impossible, but because they require something rare: confidence. The confidence to let a scene linger. To let a glance carry more weight than a monologue. To trust that silence can be louder than a gunshot. Howard Hawks had that confidence. And every frame of this film is proof. Not a spectacle. Not a sermon. Just a slow, steady walk through fear. And every footstep is filmmaking at its finest. Some films are built from spectacle, others from story. But this one was built from people. Not just the characters they played, but the actors beneath the hats and badges, their voices, their chemistry, their unscripted laughter between takes, the quiet vulnerability behind their eyes. The cast wasn't just assembled, they were chosen, each one stitched into the fabric of the film with care. And what they created together was something timeless, something unshakably human. In the years that followed, their stories, on set and off, would become almost as beloved as the film itself. It started with the sheriff, John Wayne.